Welcome to Living on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wilson. We feature amazing individuals in business and entertainment. On this episode, we had a conversation with Chris Jasper, award-winning keyboardist and composer from the iconic R&B group, the Isley Brothers. Hey, Chris, how you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you.
To become a great musician and composer, it takes years of training. How early did you start studying music?
I studied music, all my life, basically from like age 7. And when I graduated, when I was in high school, I started a trio with the two younger Isleys, Ernie and Marvin Isley. And we would tour, different places, schools and churches, and actually anywhere we could get a gig. And the older brothers had already recorded music and started their career. So when they saw us, get together and start playing together, they wanted us to join them. And that's how, the 6-member group got started.
Who was your inspiration early on?
Actually, my mother, she saw me playing by ear, because that's what I used to do when I was a kid. And she said, well, you have a good ear for music. You should take lessons.
Uh-huh.
So she knew this professor that gave piano lessons. And that's when I started to, learn about music and study music. And, I was a big fan of R&B at the time, Sam Cooke and Ray Charles and Marvin Gaye. And that was my first, the people who influenced me the most in R&B music was those 3 people. And I was, always going between R&B and classical, because the classical was what I was studying, but the music I really loved was, the R&B music. So that's kind of how I got interested in music.
Okay. With all the challenges that we're facing right now with the coronavirus, how has that affected your career?
It's affected me like everybody else, I guess, because, you gotta, stay in, you gotta watch what you do. If you go out, you gotta be safe. And it's changed, like mobility, as far as, because now, what I'm doing, I'm basically, working from home, and like a lot of other people, doing interviews. And the technical aspect of music has made it easier to do that.
Okay.
Because before, you'd always have to go out. If you're sending stuff to radio, you'd have to go out, you mail stuff. Now you can do things by email, so it's not as difficult working from home. But that's basically what I'm doing, is working from home.
Okay, that's great. So what projects do you have going on right now?
Well, I have the new album, which is coming out June 1st. It's called For the Love of You. The first single, is out now, a Sam Cooke cover, Nothing Can Change This Love, which was a great thing for me to do because I was a fan of his, all my life. So I was doing this cover album, so it was a good thing to do one of his songs, and it's doing very well for me.
Oh, that's great. So what advice would you give to someone who has aspirations of becoming a professional musician or a singer?
Well, now you have to work a little bit harder, I think, than before, because there's so much competition now. People can put out their own songs, their own records now.
Right.
Before you had to go through a record label. So work hard and really have other people look at your what you're doing, and get opinions, and really see if you're up to that level, to be able to compete with the professionals out there. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And also have legal advice. Make sure that you make the right steps as far as contracts, what you sign, who you're associated with. That's very important for the longevity of your career.
Yes. And do you have your own record label?
Yes, I do. Gold City Music.
Okay. Do you have any artists that you're managing or that are on your label right now?
Not right now. I'm working with my son. He's the only other artist right now that I'm working with. But I don't have anyone outside my family that I'm working with right now.
Okay. And is he doing R&B as well?
Yeah, he's an R&B, kind of a little different than me. A little more electronic type sound, but definitely has some soul in there.
Okay. Good. And in the future, do you have any plans on doing anything with the Isley Brothers again?
Not right now, and nobody's contacted me, with that. But I'm just working with my own music, and I'm scoring some things. My son's working on some screenplays and books, and I'm scoring music for that. So I'm kind of busy right now.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
For an artist that wants to have more control over what they've created, how hard is it to start your own label?
Well, it's not very complicated to start your label.
Hmm.
What's complicated is the product, developing the product, because you have, no matter what your company is, you're going to have product.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing. You can have a lot of people that want to join your label, like artists, but those artists have to have songs. They have to have, either they produce themselves or they have to have a producer to produce the product. So I think that's the biggest consideration that I had, starting my label, is the product has to be good. Whatever
Yes.
you are trying to push has to be good. And I started with myself because I've had a lot of experience producing music,
Hmm.
and that's what I demanded myself, is that my material be good. Any product that comes out of Gold City, a person should be able to listen to it and say, hey, I like this. It's good product. It's quality.
Yes.
And that's one thing that Motown had too. They had a production meeting. Whenever they put out a record, they wanted it to be quality.
Hmm.
I think Gordy said, "Would you buy this single or would you buy a sandwich?" you know, it has to be top notch quality. So that's the main consideration. Then the other things kind of fall in line after you have a good product. You send your product out, to radio, and generally a good product, will end up on a playlist.
Uh-huh.
But it's difficult now, because the major labels have more access to those playlists, than say an independent does.
Right.
So an independent has to, work a little harder than say maybe a major does. But those are the technical aspects of the business, But the main thing you want to have when you start a record label is product. How am I going to get my product produced?
Hmm.
Who's going to do it? And what artist is going to be working with, whatever producers I have, So the more moving parts you have to have, the more complicated it gets.
Right.
With me, I'm fortunate that, I can do just about everything that has to be done to get a record out. I'm fortunate in that way. Other people have to have other people do other things. They have to get songs, because they're not a songwriter.
Right.
So they have to seek out songwriters, and their material. And then if they're not a producer, they have to get a producer. And if they're not a musician, they got to get musicians to play, and it can get complicated. But the more you do, you can make that task a little easier.
Okay, so for you right now, what are you doing to promote your own music?
Well, I do what everybody else does. I go on the internet. I promote on the internet.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll take out radio spots, on radio stations, and basically make sure everybody has the music. That's a big job,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of stations, with the internet that increased. There used to be just sending things out to terrestrial stations.
Right.
Now you've got to service the internet too, which is, I don't know. I don't know how many stations that is, but it's a lot.
Right.
And I'm in the process of doing that with the single,
Okay. And how's
I'm
it
doing
going?
it right now. It's like, just getting it out there is a big job. Sometimes you can elicit the services of, there's certain companies that will do that. They will do blasts, like they say. They will send stuff out for you.
Right.
So we use some of those too. And we use some promotion people sometimes, to get it out there. So it's a big job doing it. But like I said, that's one of the responsibilities you have with having a label.
Right.
Is getting your product out to people, making sure they have it. And like I said, if it's good, chances are, you'll end up on a lot of playlists,
Sure.
But, it's involved, it takes a lot of work. If you're a person that likes to work hard, you won't mind doing it. Some people don't like to do all of that work, but it's a lot of work. It's pretty involved,
Well, what's your favorite part of the whole creative process?
Making records, basically. That's it. And, getting first of all, getting the idea, coming up with new ideas, because I'm a composer. I'm a trained composer, so
yes,
that composition aspect is number one, is getting the idea, and then recording it and making a song or a record out of it. I mean, starting from scratch. That's always been my favorite part of the business, is making new music.
Okay, so where does your creativity come from?
Wow. Well, it definitely comes from my training, because there's a lot of things I learned about composition by studying composition.
Okay.
So, I can rely on those tools sometimes to come up with a new idea. But then there's just pure inspiration sometimes. It's just, I always think that composing and songwriting is a gift in a way, because everybody can't, put together a complete musical thought, and make that thought something that the listener will relate to.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that part is, I believe, a gift, because you can teach people compositional tools, in school. But what you can't teach them is, all right, take those tools and come up with something that is original and something that's appealing. That part you can't really teach. And I've had experience in school with people who were, very good musical students, but composition just wasn't, their thing. They just couldn't do it. I mean, some great musicians are great musicians, but when you break it down to, okay, songwriting and composing, that's another category altogether.
Right.
So
yeah, with the Isley Brothers, the first time I ever really got interested in the Isley Brothers, I think I was about 7 years old. And my mother took me to one of your concerts at the Omni in Atlanta.
The Omni, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was back in like 78.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. And then one of my favorite songs, though, after that, I think I was about 17 years old. One of my friends from high school invited me to one of his family reunions. And I heard Hello, It's Me, like off in the distance. It was only the bass line that I heard. And I was like, who is that? So I went home and looked through all the Isley Brothers albums that we had, and I finally found it. Yeah. So after that, that's all I used to play in my car, like driving to Morehouse College. That's where I went to school.
Oh, Morehouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Hello, It's Me. That was a Todd Rundgren song that I rearranged. And that's another thing I like to do too. That's why I did this album, because this album is covers, a few Isley Brothers songs that I went back and covered, but it's also, like I did a Marvin Gaye cover, like of God Is Love, and then some other popular songs, very popular songs that I covered and put my own arrangements to.
Okay.
And I like to do that too. And Hello, It's Me was one of those. It's like totally different than the original.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, all the ballads from the Isley Brothers that you wrote, I love those songs.
Yeah. So, it's just, composition and arranging, that's kind of unteachable, but you can learn a lot about, music and construction of how a composer constructs his pieces and all that. You can learn a lot about that, analyzing music, but to actually do it is another thing altogether.
Right. So is that what you learned from Juilliard, or is that something that came later?
From 7, because my piano teacher was a professor in music, and he taught me, because I told him I wanted to be a composer.
Okay.
So he taught me a lot about, how pieces were constructed when I was a little kid, on through grade 12.
Wow. Okay.
And then I went to Juilliard, so I knew a lot before I went there, because I was well prepared as a kid. So, I knew an awful lot once I went there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I was basically putting a lot of things into practice that I'd already learned. And I was able to put a lot of that stuff in the music, in R&B, with my chord structures, songs like Highways of My Life and Lover's Eve, and, it had a lot of classical elements in them.
Right.
So I put a lot of that in R&B music, and which gave the music a certain sound. And I still use the same kind of chord structures today, because I have the same sound. That sound carried with me,
right,
wherever I went. And a lot of people have, noticed that, because they said, hey, I had an interview the other day, and someone said, I didn't even realize that there was a break, from the 6-member group to Isley Jasper Isley.
Oh, no?
We did Caravan of Love. He said, because the music sounded kind of the same,
right.
had the same sound to it. And I said, yeah, that's the signature thing that I brought to the group, is the way the music sounds. Like you said, Hello, It's Me. The sound of the song, that's all those chord structures, that's something that I brought to the group.
Right.
And that sound carries with me, because that's me. But that comes from the classical training in jazz, a little bit of jazz too, is in those chords,
Yeah, a lot of the things that I appreciate from the Isley Brothers, and the way that you compose songs, you just don't hear right now in R&B music and other genres. So yeah, that's one thing that I really appreciate about your songs.
Well, thank you. I really gave it some thought, before, when I was first getting with the older guys, because they had another band when we first started playing with them.
Right.
I think they were called the Midnight Movers.
Oh, yeah.
They played with Wilson Pickett, they played with other R&B artists too.
Okay.
But they started with the Isley Brothers when I graduated high school. and they were their kind of backup band. And when the three of us got with them, you know, it slowly started to change, you know, and by 73, 3+3 album,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I was able to put my treatment to the arrangements, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because they had another arranger before. Guy's name was George Patterson, and he was good, you know.
Right.
He was a horn player. They, you know, they had a horn section and all that, you know, and it was a different sound.
Mm-hmm.
And as 3+3, the sound changed. Like, it's a big change. If you hear the stuff before 3+3, and then after 3+3, it's like totally different. And that's because there was a switch in arrangers. I became the arranger.
Okay.
And George Patterson, you know, the band, they started doing something else, you know. So it was a big switch, and you can hear it in the music, you know.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, it's a little bit of the background, you know.
So, what would you say is characteristic about the music that you're doing right now? Is it similar to what you did before, or is it different?
It's similar in that, like I said, the chord structures could be similar, but I'm able to expand even more, even with the vocals and stuff, you know, like the background vocals and the lead vocals too. I've just taken it to another step, you know, musically.
Uh-huh.
That's the best way I can explain it. Because, you know, when you're working with people, sometimes you have to play to their strengths, you know.
Right.
And stay in a certain zone, right? But with me, it's like totally, you know, anything goes, so to speak. I don't have to stay in a place where, like Ronald would be comfortable, right?
Uh-huh.
I can do everything that I wanted to do before, and more things, you know what I mean? It's sort of like how Caravan of Love was, you know.
Mm-hmm.
When I did Caravan of Love, that was like an expansion, you know, because the music before, it had a similar sound,
Mm-hmm.
but it was bigger, you know, and the vocals went different places, you know what I mean?
Right.
The backgrounds even moved around, you know. There's more freedom, and I guess that's the way I can express my music now. I can express my music in a lot of different ways. Like, I've taken this cover album, there's a lot of new things in it.
Uh-huh.
You know, new music with these covers, because they're not, I didn't do the typical, you know, copy what's already there.
Right.
It's just like Hello It's Me. I changed it, you know, and expanded it. And I'm very happy I'm able to do that, because I kind of felt, especially at like the end when the 6 members were together, I felt like we needed to grow, you know, and we weren't growing enough.
Okay. Yeah, you were always doing the same kind of music.
Yeah, it was always in the same kind of pocket, you know. And I'm able to do that more. I'm able to expand more now, you know. And just the music is just bigger. It's broader. I think it fits more formats. You know what I mean? And people have told me that, and you know, it's I'm happy they hear it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because that's what I wanted to do. You know, I've always wanted to expand and go more places with music. I even did the covers of the Isley Brothers. You know, For the Love of You I covered,
Mm-hmm.
which is a big, you know, favorite back then. And I did Once Had Your Love, Can't Let Go. And when you hear those covers, you may hear what I'm talking about, you know, as far as expanding, you know, and just going a little bit further, but keeping it, you know, identifiable.
Right.
You still identify it as a song, but it has other things in there, you know, other ingredients. It's like taking a good recipe and making it better.
Right.
You know?
So when you were with Ronald, did you have creative differences, or?
Well, both of us being vocalists too, and I'm a composer at you know, number one. I'm a writer, so, you know. And there were some times where he knew the melody, but sometimes the interpretation was hard to get across to him.
Okay.
You know, because he didn't write it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's almost like I kind of just maybe an analogy would be, say, an actor, two actors. One of them understand the character a little better than the other one does.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and can portray that character a little better because of their understanding of the character. And those were the kind of problems that we would run into, because, you know, we both like Sam Cooke, and, you know, sometimes the melodies would be easy for him to latch onto because of that, you know,
Right.
because of that influence. But then the interpretation sometimes, you know, like getting into character, some songs were harder for him to do it, and some songs were easier for him to do it. But when we ran into difficulty, it was because of that. You know, he just didn't understand the delivery, you know, how the delivery should be, because some of them were kind of plain, you know, you know, when they should have had more feeling in it. You know what I mean?
So did that happen when you were actually recording the songs, or
Yeah.
in live performances too?
Well, recording, basically, recording.
Okay.
Yeah. Because live, we usually did the songs he did better.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because some of the songs that he didn't interpret well, we really didn't do live.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? So, but like, you know, that's where I felt the group could have expanded, you know, like, you know, I don't know how well he would have interpreted Caravan of Love, you know what I mean? It would have been a different song, you
Right.
know?
Entirely.
Because with Caravan, you had to jump back and forth between smooth and then, you know, I'm Your Brother part was aggressive, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the feeling was in there, you know what I mean? You can't say I'm your brother plain.
Yeah.
I'm your brother, you know. I'm your brother, you know. You gotta have that soul in it, you know, when you say that. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean. Interpretation sometimes is important, you know, because you want the people to feel what you're trying to make them feel.
Right.
And it does, you know, but it seems like a little thing, but sometimes it's a difference between an effective song and a song that's not so effective.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You can say, yeah, I like that song, but, you know, something's kind of missing from it. You know, I can't put my finger on it.
Right.
You know.
So what's your feeling on today's R&B?
You know, I don't know if I think musically, because there's a lot of good singers,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but I think musically it's lacking in that a lot of the younger people don't understand R&B music. They don't understand it. They don't understand how to write it. You know what I mean? And what you end up having is, you know, really repetitive songs with the same kind of production.
Right.
You know, they all sound the same because they don't understand, you know, R&B is bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And you have to study it a little bit. Like, you know, I've always been a student of music. I studied the blues, I studied jazz, I studied everything.
Right.
And once you get exposed to everything, your understanding increases. And then you start to put that understanding into your music. That's why the music of the 60s, 70s, you know, and even part of the 80s was so impactful.
Yeah.
Because
the best music.
You had all of these people who were musical people, they studied music. The arrangers, you know, studied music. Even a lot of the artists were musicians. Aretha Franklin was a singer, but she was also a musician.
Right.
Marvin Gaye was an artist, musician.
Mm-hmm.
Jimi Hendrix, musician. You know, you go all the way down the line. I don't care who you name, just about they are musicians too.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a difference. That makes a difference in the quality of the music. A lot of times.
Absolutely.
You know, Bill Withers, musician. You know what I mean? I can just keep going on and on.
Right.
Little Richard, musician. You know, I mean, you know, Chuck Berry, musician. I mean, you just keep going. And that's why it was so rich and so versatile and so diverse. Because you had all these musicians, you know, Sly, you know, you just keep going, Earth, Wind, and Fire. They were all musicians. And that's what gives you the type of quality, is because of their understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody didn't sound the same.
No, not like
You know
today.
You know what I mean? And that's because they had their own musical direction and their own musical vision. You know, Stevie Wonder didn't sound like Marvin Gaye.
No.
You know what I mean? He had his own vision. And that's what's missing. That's what's missing in today's music.
Mm.
You know, everybody would say, well, let me make a record that sounds like that one, you know?
Right.
Instead of, you know, having their own kind of vision and their own direction.
Mm.
And that's what I'm saying. Composition is not something that's easily taught. It has to be within the person. And I think the focus today is a lot more on image
Mm-hmm.
than on content.
Yeah, and quality too.
Yeah, the focus is on image first, usually, and the product is going to be what the product is going to be when you do that. You know, it's not going to be the type of quality, you know, that you've been used to. If you've been around for a while, you know what I mean, you're kind of used to a certain kind of quality.
Right.
You know, and it may be disappointing.
Hmm. I agree with you on that. A lot of the new music, you know, some of it is good, but the majority of it, I don't listen to.
You know, the most things I like the most is the people that try to do the old school stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Like Bruno Mars. You know, he kind of did the kind of old school thing, but it was nice. You know.
Yeah.
It was kind of refreshing to hear. You know, somebody did something a little different. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know.
And he is a musician.
Yeah. There you go. See, I mean, you know.
Right.
You're gonna get that stuff from musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Because generally they know where they want to go with something. You know, they know where they want to go with music.